It was a rainy afternoon when Clara found herself rummaging through the dusty attic of her late grandmother's house. She hadn't planned on being there. In fact, she had spent most of her life avoiding this place. The creaky floors, the stale air that clung to her clothes, and the lingering memories of a childhood filled with secret. But her grandmother's passing had forced her back into this house, and there was something almost magnetic about the way the attic pulled her in. Amid the clutter of old photo albums, forgotten trinkets, and faded clothes, Clara's attention was drawn to an old oak chest tucked away in the corner, hidden beneath a heavy blanket of dust. She knelt beside it, her fingers tracing the delicate carvings along its edges. The lock was broken, rusted from years of neglect, making it easy to pry open. Inside, she found a pile of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. One letter, however, stood out, a single envelope, worn and stained but never opened. It was addressed to her grandmother, dated nearly 4 decades ago, and yet the seal remained intact. Curiosity got the better of her. She hesitated for a moment, battling the feeling that she was intruding on something deeply personal, but the compulsion was too strong. Clara tore open the envelope, her heart pounding as she unfolded the brittle paper. The words were written in a hurried scrawl, frantic and pleading. "This cannot go on. We have to end this before it's too late. The truth must never come out. I will not be a part of this anymore." Clara's mind raced. The letter was unsigned, but it was clear that it spoke of some family secret, something dark and hidden. As she read on, vague references to arrangements, deceit, and a price too high left her with more questions than answers. What was her grandmother involved in? And why was this letter never sent? Determined to uncover the truth, Clara tucked the letter into her pocket. Felt like she was holding a live wire, something dangerous and volatile. She knew she should have let it go, but she couldn't. She was about to unravel a conspiracy that had been buried for years, one that would pull her deeper than she ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur of frantic research. Clara pored over old journals, faded photographs, and any scrap of information she could find. The deeper she dug, the more sinister the picture became. The names mentioned in the letter, Alfred, Marie, and John, seemed familiar yet elusive. They were not just distant relatives. They were key players in a web of deception that had been spun long before she was born. Alfred was her great-uncle, a man whose name was rarely spoken, but whose influence was felt in every corner of the family. Marie was his wife, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her cunning. And John was their son, Clara's cousin, who had died under mysterious circumstances when he was just a teenager. It was John's death that seemed to be the catalyst for everything, a tragic event that had been shrouded in whispers and half-truths. Clara found herself obsessed, spending late nights at the local library, poring over newspaper clippings and old police reports. The official story was that John had drowned, but there were inconsistencies. Witnesses who had seen him arguing with his parents the night before, unexplained bruises, and a rushed funeral that left more questions than closure. The deeper Clara looked, the more convinced she became that John's death was no accident. What was the connection to the letter? The words kept echoing in her mind. Truth must never come out. It was clear that someone in the family had been desperate to keep a secret buried, and Clara was determined to find out why. She reached out to her mother, hoping for some answers, but was met with resistance. "Let it go, Clara," her mother warned, her voice edged with fear. "Some things are better left in the past." But Clara couldn't let it go. She was on the brink of something big, something that could change everything. And as she pieced together the fragments of the past, she realized that she was no longer just an observer in this story. She was a part of it, whether she liked it or not. Clara's search led her to an old family friend, Mrs. Winslow, who had been close to her grandmother and was one of the last remaining links to that time. Meeting her in a dimly lit parlor, Clara hoped for answers. Elderly woman's eyes clouded with age but still sharp with memories, studied Clara carefully before speaking. "You look just like her," Mrs. Winslow said, voice tinged with nostalgia and something else, fear. "Your grandmother was a strong woman, but she was caught in something she couldn't control." Mrs. Winslow revealed bits and pieces of a dark past, Alfred's shady business dealings, Marie's obsession with keeping up appearances, and John's rebellious nature that clashed violently with his parents' ambitions. But it was the revelation about John's true parentage that shook Clara to her core. "He wasn't Alfred's son," Mrs. Winslow whispered, voice barely audible. "Marie had an affair. When Alfred found out, he was furious. But instead of leaving her, they made a pact to keep it quiet. The boy John, he was the price they paid for their silence." Clara's mind reeled. John was not just a tragic figure. He was a living reminder of betrayal and lies. And now, it seemed that his death had been more than a tragic accident. It was a calculated act of desperation, a final effort to keep the family's darkest secret buried. Clara left Mrs. Winslow's house with a heavy heart. She now knew the truth, but what would she do with it? As Clara's investigations intensified, she began to notice unsettling changes around her. She was being followed. Strange cars parked near her house, phone calls that ended in silence, and an uneasy feeling that someone was always watching. The once quiet streets felt menacing, and the shadows in her grandmother's old house seemed to grow longer each night. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Clara couldn't stop now. The truth was so close, and she was determined to bring it to light. She started to dig deeper into Alfred's business record, hoping to find something that would link him to John's death. What she found was a trail of blackmail, bribery, and threats that pointed directly to her great-uncle. It was clear that Alfred had been pulling the strings all along, using his wealth and influence to silence anyone who knew the truth about John's parentage. Clara realized that the letter she had found was more than just a desperate plea. It was a confession, final attempt by someone to break free from Alfred's grip. But now that Clara had unearthed these long-buried secrets, she was in danger. Alfred's legacy was built on lies, and anyone who threatened to expose them would be dealt with. Just like John, the weight of her discovery pressed down on her. Clara knew there was no turning back. One evening, Clara returned home to find her house ransacked. Drawers were pulled open, papers scattered, and the old letter was gone. Panic surged through her. She had underestimated the lengths to which her family would go to protect their secrets. As she frantically searched for anything that remained, she found a note slipped under her door. A chilling reminder that her actions had not gone unnoticed. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like him." The words were a direct threat, and Clara knew exactly what it meant. They were warning her to back off or face the same fate as John. But Clara was not easily intimidated. She knew that if she stopped now, the truth would die with her. Determined to confront her fears, Clara arranged a meeting with her uncle, Alfred's son. She needed answers, and she was willing to risk everything to get them. Confrontation was tense, filled with accusations and denials, but in the end, it was Alfred's son who broke. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he confessed, his voice trembling. "This isn't just about money or power. It's about survival. Our entire family is built on this lie, and if you expose it, everything will come crashing down." Clara realized then that she was fighting more than just a corrupt family. She was battling an entire legacy built on deceit. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when she was so close. Clara's determination led her to a final, chilling discovery, one that tied everything together. She found an old diary belonging to her grandmother, hidden away in a false drawer in the attic. The diary detailed the agonizing decision her grandmother had made to protect the family's reputation, even at the cost of her grandson's life. It was her grandmother who had orchestrated everything, manipulating Alfred and Marie, and ultimately, sealing John's fate. The letter Clara had found was her grandmother's last-ditch effort to end the cycle of lies, but she had never had the courage to send it. Clara stood in the attic, the weight of her family's sins pressing down on her. She had the power to expose everything, finally let the truth see the light of day. But at what cost? As she looked out at the rain-soaked streets below, she realized that some secrets were meant to stay buried. With trembling hands, Clara lit a match and watched as the letter burned to ashes. She would carry the truth with her, a burden that would haunt her for the rest of her life. But she would not let it destroy her family. The conspiracy would die with her, and the ghosts of the past would remain where they belonged, in the shadows.